When the batteries die and the generators fall silent, what remains? Indigenous tribes survived for millennia without a single power outlet. Their secret wasn't better technology, it was deeper knowledge. While we stockpile gadgets, they cultivated relationships with the living world. In their hands, survival wasn't something bought, it was something learned. In the hands of Indigenous hunters, silence meant survival. The blowgun transformed a simple breath into deadly force, allowing tribes to take down prey without alerting every animal within earshot. Unlike modern weapons with their mechanical parts and ammunition, these elegant tools required only keen observation and materials found in any forest. Construction began with selecting the perfect tube. Amazon tribes favoured straight sections of bamboo or certain reeds, carefully dried and cured to prevent warping. The interior was polished smooth, using abrasive leaves or sand, creating a precision barrel sometimes reaching 8 feet in length. Southeast Asian versions often featured clever innovations, double-chambered designs that increased power through air compression, while North American tribes created shorter versions adapted to dense forest hunting. But what of the projectiles themselves? Darts typically began as palm wood slivers or bamboo splinters, whittled to perfect straightness and tipped with natural cotton or kapok fibre. This fibre created an air seal within the tube, transforming a gentle breath into focused pneumatic power. The deadly accuracy came from both the weapon and the hunter's intimate knowledge of wind, distance, and prey behaviour. The most fascinating aspect wasn't the hardware, but the chemistry. Tribes developed sophisticated poisons that paralysed without contaminating meat. Curare, extracted from woody vines through complex preparation, affected muscle function while leaving the meat perfectly edible. Some South American groups harvested secretions from poisoned dart frogs, carefully applying minute amounts to dart tips. How did they handle such potent toxins without harming themselves? Through generations of knowledge, teaching which plants neutralize poisons and which preparation methods minimized exposure. Effective hunters could take down birds and monkeys from 30 yards away, targeting vital areas with remarkable precision. Beyond the practical advantages of silence, blowguns allowed hunters to fire multiple shots without revealing their position, a critical edge when every meal required careful stalking. This knowledge wasn't casual, it was sacred. Young hunters underwent years of training, learning not just technique, but respect for prey. Many tribes incorporated ceremonial elements, from prayers for successful hunts to rituals honouring animal spirits. While the silent efficiency of the blowgun secured meat, tribes knew the real secret to wilderness survival wasn't just hunting skill. It was preserving every precious calorie through ingenious food storage. Food preservation wasn't just a convenience for Indigenous tribes. It was the difference between feast and famine. What hunters brought home had to last through lean seasons, long journeys, and unpredictable weather. Enter pemmican, perhaps the original survival superfood. Long before vacuum-sealed packages and freeze-dried meals, Native American tribes, particularly the Plains peoples, created a complete food system that could sustain life for months or even years without refrigeration. At its most basic, pemmican consisted of 3 elements: lean meat dried to perfect crispness, rendered animal fat, and dried berries. The simplicity belied its genius. Bison, elk, or deer meat was sliced thin and dried in the sun or over slow smoke until completely moisture-free. This meat was then pounded using stone tools until it reached a nearly powdered consistency. Separately, fat from the animals was carefully rendered, clarified, and stored. Seasonal berries, chokecherries, blueberries, saskatoons were gathered, dried, and sometimes pulverized. The preparation required patience and precision. After the meat reached powder form, hot rendered fat was poured over it, creating a binding matrix that sealed out air and moisture. Berries were mixed in, adding both flavor and crucial vitamins. The mixture was then packed tightly into rawhide containers called parfleches, or formed into cakes and allowed to cool. Some tribes added herbs or honey. Others preferred pure meat and fat mixtures for maximum storage life. What makes pemmican extraordinary? Its nutritional completeness. Modern analysis shows it provides an ideal balance of protein and fat, with a caloric density approaching 3,000 calories per pound. A single handful could sustain a warrior or hunter through an entire day of strenuous activity. The essential fatty acids prevented protein deficiency, while the dried berries contributed vitamin C, preventing the scurvy that plagued many European explorers. Most remarkable was its shelf life. Properly prepared pemmican remained edible for decades. Lewis and Clark reported finding caches years old, yet perfectly preserved. Arctic explorers later adopted pemmican, recognizing what indigenous peoples had known for centuries. This was portable nutrition at its most efficient. Different regions perfected variations. Coastal tribes incorporated dried salmon, while woodland peoples might add nuts or maple sugar. With their bodies fueled by concentrated nutrition that could last through any journey, tribal peoples turned to another essential skill: transforming flowing water into a constant source of protein without constant attention. Water offered tribes an opportunity unlike any other hunting ground, a place where prey could be captured while the hunter was elsewhere. Fish traps transformed rivers and coastlines into passive hunting systems that worked day and night, requiring only occasional attention while providing reliable protein. These ingenious structures represented perfect harmony between human need and natural patterns. The materials came straight from nearby landscapes. Flexible willow or river cane formed the main structures, while rushes and reeds were woven into intricate patterns. Coastal tribes often built larger, more permanent traps using stone walls arranged in careful formations that worked with tidal rhythms rather than fighting them. What materials would work best? Those that blended with the environment, withstood water pressure, and could be replaced seasonally when damaged. Design varied widely based on location and target species. Funnel traps narrowed to allow fish easy entrance but difficult exit. Weirs, fence-like structures, guided fish toward collection points where they could be easily gathered. Basket traps, often baited, captured bottom feeders and crustaceans. The common principle? Understanding fish behaviour and turning it to advantage without disrupting the ecosystem. Placement required intimate knowledge of water systems. Traps were set at narrows where currents naturally concentrated fish, inside pools where spawning occurred, or along migratory routes during seasonal runs. Northwest coast tribes positioned elaborate wooden traps at river bends where salmon naturally slowed. Desert peoples placed basket traps in narrow canyon streams where flash floods brought sudden bounties. What made these systems truly revolutionary was their efficiency. Once built, traps worked continuously without human presence. A family could set several traps, then focus on gathering plants, preparing materials, or tending to children, returning only to collect the day's catch. How different from the constant vigilance required by active hunting. Perhaps most impressive was the sustainability built into traditional designs. Traps included escape routes for undersized fish, could be opened during spawning periods, and captured only what was needed without depleting populations. Many incorporated ingenious features, allowing excess fish to bypass the trap during abundant runs, ensuring sufficient numbers reach spawning grounds. These ingenious fishing systems required something more fundamental than tools: the ability to transform raw plant fibers into strong, flexible cordage that could withstand water, weight, and weather. Fiber was the foundation upon which survival itself was built. Long before modern rope, tribal peoples transformed ordinary plants into cordage so strong it could lift heavy loads, secure shelters, and withstand years of exposure to the elements. This wasn't just a craft. It was the technology that made all other technologies possible. Plant identification was the first crucial skill. Desert dwellers relied heavily on yucca and agave, whose sword-like leaves contained remarkably strong fibres. In temperate regions, stinging nettle, despite its defensive irritants, yielded some of the strongest plant cordage available. Dogbane, ironically named dog killer, yet invaluable to humans, provided fibres that resisted rot even when repeatedly soaked. Cedar's inner bark gave coastal tribes rot-resistant material perfect for fishing lines and nets. How did they find these plants? By testing everything available until generations of knowledge revealed which ones held hidden strength. Processing these raw materials required both tools and technique. Harvesting typically occurred during specific seasons. Dogbane stems were collected after flowering, but before winter, brittleness set in. Fresh yucca leaves were roasted or soaked to soften their flesh. Then came separation. Using bone or stone scrapers, the fleshy portions were scraped away, revealing long, pale fibres beneath. These fibres were dried, sometimes washed to remove natural glues, then prepared for twisting. The fundamental technique, reverse wrap twisting, remains unchanged from ancient times to modern survival applications. Two bundles of fibre were twisted individually clockwise, then wrapped counterclockwise around each other, creating mechanical strength through opposing forces. Fine cordage for fishing lines needed tight, even twists, while heavy rope for hauling logs required multiple strands braided together. The strongest ropes used multiple two-ply cords wrapped into thicker cables capable of supporting a warrior's weight. Testing wasn't optional. New cordage was stretched, twisted and loaded before being trusted with critical applications. A simple snap test, a quick jerk between hands, revealed weak spots. Inconsistencies in thickness or twist meant starting over. From almost invisible snare wire to thumb-thick hauling ropes, natural cordage made everything possible. Fishing nets, bowstrings, baby carriers, and shelter lashings. Some tribes created cordage so fine it could be woven into bags capable of holding water itself. With strong natural ropes securing everything from tools to shelters, tribes next needed containers that could hold their most precious resource, water, even through the harshest weather and longest journeys. Water posed a fundamental challenge: how to carry it when nature provided no containers. Long before pottery or metal canteens, Indigenous peoples developed an astonishing solution. Baskets so tightly woven they could hold water without a single drop escaping. These weren't just functional items, but masterpieces of botanical knowledge and fine motor skill. Material selection determined everything. Northwestern tribes harvested spruce roots, digging carefully to extract long, flexible sections without killing the tree. Southwestern peoples relied on sumac and willow, while yucca fibres served desert communities. Cedar bark, when properly processed, created soft, pliable material perfect for watertight weaving. These materials weren't randomly chosen. Each had properties of flexibility, strength and natural resistance to water absorption when properly prepared. The weaving itself represented generations of perfected technique. Many water baskets used twining methods, where active strands wrapped around passive ones, creating a spiral pattern of incredible density. How tight was this weaving? The finest examples contained up to 60 stitches per inch, a level of precision rivaling modern machine-made textiles. The basket's shape often included a slight narrowing at the top to reduce sloshing during transport. Even perfect weaving needed help to achieve complete waterproofing. Natural sealants transformed good baskets into perfect containers. Pine pitch, collected and heated to workable consistency, was rubbed into the weave. Some tribes used beeswax, while others employed acorn flour paste that swelled when moistened, filling any remaining gaps. These sealants required regular renewal, a maintenance practice that became ritual in many communities. Perhaps most fascinating were the decorative elements that weren't merely aesthetic, but functional. Geometric patterns often marked areas of reinforcement where strain would be greatest. Different coloured fibres weren't chosen only for beauty, but because certain plants offered superior water resistance or strength at critical junctures. Beyond water storage, these containers revolutionised cooking itself. By adding heated stones to water-filled baskets, tribes could boil food without fire damage to the container, a technique called stone boiling that predated pottery by thousands of years. The same containers might store dried foods, serve as measuring tools, or become trade items of immense value. These handcrafted vessels kept water in, but the tribe's relationship with animals provided another essential: the knowledge to transform raw hides into supple, waterproof leather, using nothing but materials found in the forest. Animal hides represented nature's perfect material, waterproof yet breathable, insulating yet flexible. The ancient art of transforming stiff, raw skin into supple, lasting leather was perhaps the most sophisticated chemistry Indigenous peoples practiced, relying on unexpected ingredients found within the animal itself. Most remarkable was brain tanning, a process based on profound biological elegance. Every animal, tribes discovered, contained exactly enough brain matter to tan its own hide. The phospholipids and lecithin in brain tissue penetrated between collagen fibres in the skin, preventing them from gluing together when dry, resulting in permanently soft leather. After scraping away hair and flesh using tools crafted from bone, stone, or river mussel shells, the prepared hide was immersed in a warm solution of mashed brain tissue and worked by hand until completely saturated. But brain tanning alone created leather vulnerable to water. The critical next stage, smoke curing, introduced aldehydes that cross-linked protein fibres, creating water-resistant, washable leather that wouldn't stiffen when wet. Hides were sewn into cone shapes and suspended over smouldering, oxygen-reduced fires made from punky wood or specific plants chosen for their smoke properties. The golden brown colour that developed wasn't just attractive, it indicated proper chemical changes within the hide structure. In regions where different properties were desired, plant-based tanning emerged. Oak galls, naturally high in tannic acid, created darker, more rigid leather ideal for footwear. Sumac leaves yielded a similar effect, while specific barks produced specialised characteristics for different applications. How did they discover these properties? Through generations of careful observation, with knowledge passed from expert to apprentice. The physical work was equally important. Stretching leather across specialised frames, tribal tanners worked it continuously during drying, using stone or bone tools to prevent stiffening. Some groups chewed leather edges to achieve ultimate softness for sensitive applications like baby carriers or moccasins. The process wasn't merely technical, but deeply spiritual, with many tribes performing ceremonies honouring the animal's sacrifice before beginning. The resulting material served countless purposes: clothing that insulated yet breathed, shelter coverings that repelled rain, containers, ropes, and tools. Nothing was wasted. Even scraps became thread when cut into fine strips. Wrapped in leather that breathed yet repelled rain, tribes still needed protection from the elements that was more substantial. Shelters constructed without nails, saws, or modern tools, yet capable of withstanding nature's fury. Shelter meant the difference between life and death when storms rolled in or temperatures plummeted. Indigenous peoples constructed dwellings without hardware stores or lumber yards, using only what forests, grasslands, and deserts provided. These weren't crude emergency structures, but sophisticated systems engineered to withstand specific environmental challenges. Framework began with understanding wood's natural properties. Young saplings, particularly willow, maple, or birch, offered flexibility when green that became rigid strength once dried in position. Plains tribes bent these saplings into dome-shaped wickiups or lodges, while woodland peoples often created peaked structures following the natural growth patterns of saplings. The framework determined everything: stability in wind, snow load capacity, and interior space. Binding these frames required mastery of natural cordage. Overlapping elements were secured with specialised lashing techniques using twisted fibre, rawhide strips, or plant roots. These weren't simple knots, but sophisticated wrapping patterns that distributed strain across multiple points, preventing failure under stress. The Wahakashka wrap, used by several plains tribes, actually tightened when wet rather than loosening. A critical advantage during storms. Insulation varied dramatically by climate and available materials. Northeastern longhouses used layered bark panels that shed water while trapping air. Desert dwellings incorporated thick mud over brush frameworks that moderated temperature swings. Arctic peoples layered insulation in careful sequence. Mosses closest to the frame absorbed moisture from inside, while outer materials repelled wind and precipitation. How effective were these natural insulators? Modern testing shows some traditional insulation systems approached R-values of contemporary building materials. Waterproofing completed the system through overlapping techniques. Bark sheets were positioned like shingles, shedding water downward. Prairie shelters used carefully arranged grass bundles in tight overlapping rows. Coastal peoples sometimes added fish oil treatments to repel rain, while desert dwellings integrated natural clay that expanded when dampened, sealing gaps. The true genius emerged in adaptability. Summer versions of many dwellings incorporated removable sections for ventilation. Winter preparations might include adding insulation layers or reducing interior volume. A skilled builder could construct an emergency shelter from standing materials in less than an hour, while permanent dwellings evolved over seasons as families added sections or replaced weather-damaged components. While building these dwellings, the foundations of tribal technology literally took shape in their hands. Stone tools crafted through an ancient art form that turned raw rock into razor-sharp implements. Stone became an extension of human hands through an ancient craft few modern people have witnessed. The transformation of ordinary rock into cutting edges sharper than surgical steel required deep knowledge of geology, physics, and skill built through thousands of repetitive motions. This was knapping, the original cutting-edge technology. Not just any stone would serve. Knappers sought materials with specific properties, those capable of conchoidal fracture, breaking with predictable curved surfaces rather than along straight planes. Flint, chert, and obsidian were prized for this quality. Testing was simple but effective. Striking a small flake revealed the stone's internal structure and fracture patterns. The distinctive ring of quality stone, a clear, bell-like tone when struck, told experienced knappers they'd found usable material. Some tribes travelled hundreds of miles to access superior stone sources, creating extensive trade networks around particularly fine materials. Two fundamental techniques formed the foundation of all knapping. Percussion flaking used direct strikes with stone or antler hammers to remove large flakes and create basic shapes. The more refined pressure flaking used antler or bone tools to press off smaller flakes, creating precisely shaped edges and points. Could these stone tools match modern steel? Obsidian blades, when freshly knapped, produce cutting edges measuring just 3 nanometers thick, sharper than the finest surgical scalpels available today. The diversity of resulting tools was remarkable. Scrapers with specialized edge angles processed hides. Burins with chisel-like points engraved bone and wood. Awls punched holes through tough materials. Projectile points were crafted in regional styles with specific design features for different hunting applications. Knives range from simple flakes to carefully shaped blades with ergonomic grips. Maintenance kept these tools functional for years. Edge refreshing, removing small flakes from dulled edges, restored sharpness without reshaping the entire tool. The most valuable implements were often repurposed several times as they wore down, transitioning from large cutting tools to smaller scrapers or points. Most stone tools were attached to handles using sophisticated hafting techniques. Pine resin mixed with beeswax and plant fibres created waterproof adhesives that hardened like modern epoxy. Rawhide wrappings, shrinking tight as they dried, secured stone to wood with surprising strength. Those same stone blades that shaped tools and processed game also served a higher purpose: precise instruments for tribal healers who transformed the living pharmacy of the forest into powerful medicines. Medical knowledge flourished in tribal societies as a sophisticated science based on centuries of careful observation. The forest, prairie and desert served as living pharmacies, with specific plants harvested, prepared and administered by healers who understood their properties with remarkable precision. Their herbal wisdom anticipated many modern pharmaceutical discoveries by thousands of years. These natural pharmacists classified plants by primary effect. Antimicrobial agents like echinacea, wild oregano, and certain tree resins fought infection before germ theory existed. Pain-relieving plants included willow bark, containing salicylic acid, the forerunner of aspirin, and powerful analgesics like wild lettuce. Wound healing accelerators range from plantain leaves that drew out infection to tree resins with natural antiseptic properties. How effective were these treatments? Modern laboratory analysis has confirmed the antimicrobial properties of dozens of traditional medicines, with some showing efficacy against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Preparation methods varied by plant part and desired outcome. Water-based extractions, teas and infusions, released water-soluble compounds from leaves and flowers. Oil-based preparations captured different properties from the same plants. Poultices applied plant material directly to wounds, while concentrated tinctures preserved medicinal properties for months, using plant alcohols or vinegars as natural preservatives. Diagnosis didn't rely on modern tools, but on refined observational skills. Pulse characteristics, skin appearance, breath sounds, and even subtle scent changes provided information about internal conditions. Many healers developed diagnostic frameworks comparing human systems to natural processes they observed in the environment. Preservation ensured year-round access to seasonal medicines. Plants were dried in specific ways to maintain potency, some in shade, others in sunlight, depending on their volatile compounds. Roots and barks were often harvested in fall when their medicinal properties concentrated in underground structures. This knowledge wasn't recorded in books, but preserved through careful apprenticeship. Young healers spent years learning plant identification, ethical harvesting practices that ensured renewal, and ceremonial aspects that integrated physical treatment with spiritual healing. Many preparations required prayers or specific mental states during creation, recognizing the connection between healer intention and medicine effectiveness. Even with medicine securing health, tribes knew survival depended on something even more fundamental: reliable access to clean water through ingenious collection systems that worked regardless of rainfall patterns. Water remained the most essential resource for tribal survival, but sources weren't always obvious or accessible. Indigenous water systems revealed profound understanding of how moisture moves through environments, visible and invisible pathways that could mean life or death in harsh landscapes. Where modern eyes might see only desert, tribal peoples recognized countless water sources hidden in plain sight. Plant transpiration provided one ingenious collection method. By enclosing leafy branches in tightly wrapped bark or animal bladders, tribes captured the water vapor plants naturally release, essentially creating solar stills. A single birch tree could yield several cups of pure water daily through this method, with no visible water source required. Desert peoples constructed more elaborate pit stills using specific plants known for high water content. Dew collection transformed morning moisture into reliable water sources. Absorbent natural materials, certain mosses, lichen-covered rocks, or specially arranged stone patterns, were positioned overnight to capture condensation, then wrung or drained into containers at dawn. Some tribes created sloped collection surfaces, directing dew to central collection points. Trees themselves served as natural reservoirs. Maple and birch sap provided clean, mineral-rich water during specific seasons. Desert-dwelling peoples tapped into barrel cactus and certain yucca species that stored significant water. What indicated potential water sources in seemingly dry landscapes? Plants with specific leaf structures, root patterns, or growth habits served as reliable markers for underground water. Purification systems demonstrated sophisticated natural engineering. Layered filters using sand, charcoal, and specific crushed plant materials removed contaminants through both mechanical and chemical means. Certain seeds containing natural coagulants clarified cloudy water when crushed and stirred into containers. Could tribal peoples identify unsafe water without testing equipment? Absolutely. Bitter, metallic, or unusual tastes were recognized as danger signs, while specific plant reactions indicated problematic minerals. Storage solutions varied by climate and materials. In arid regions, stone-lined pits sealed with clay preserved precious water for months. Clay-lined baskets treated with specific resins became semi-permanent storage vessels. Seasonal strategies included ice pits, where winter snow was insulated with specific materials, creating summer reservoirs in northern regions. With thirst quenched and health maintained, tribes turned their attention to the hunt, not through brute force, but through an intricate understanding of animal behaviour and sign reading that bordered on the supernatural. Reading the landscape was perhaps the most sophisticated skill Indigenous hunters developed, a form of literacy where subtle disturbances in soil, vegetation, and environment revealed stories invisible to untrained eyes. Tribal tracking wasn't simply following footprints, but interpreting an intricate language written across the earth itself. Track identification began with recognizing not just the shape, but the movement pattern unique to each animal. A deer's pointed hoofprints told one story, a bear's plantigrade track another. Aging these tracks required noticing minute details, the sharpness of edges, moisture retention, insect activity around deposits, and weather effects since creation. How old was that track? An experienced hunter could determine if it was minutes, hours, or days old by examining how pollen had settled into depressions or how morning dew had affected its clarity. Pressure release tracking represented an even more refined approach. By reading subtle disturbances in soil compression, tracking how plants slowly rebounded after being stepped on, or noticing displacement patterns in ground cover, hunters followed animals across surfaces that held no visible footprints. These techniques allowed tracking across rock, water margins, and dense vegetation, where conventional tracking failed. Prediction transformed tracking from following to intercepting. By understanding habitat preferences, feeding patterns, and response to weather changes, hunters anticipated animal movements rather than simply following them. This knowledge included recognizing specific plants animals sought during different seasons and how their behavior shifted before weather changes. Camouflage went far beyond visual concealment. Hunters rubbed specific plants on their bodies to neutralize human scent. Clothing incorporated natural materials that minimized sound, softer hides for silent movement, plant fibers that didn't rustle. Even breathing techniques reduced detection, with approaches for minimizing visible breath in cold conditions. Children learned these skills not through formal lessons, but through games that developed sensory awareness, identifying animals by sound alone, recognizing plants blindfolded by touch and smell, and preserving found tracks by carefully creating clay or mud casts that became teaching tools. Success in the hunt often depended on more than individual skill. It required coordination and communication across distances, using a sophisticated system of signals developed over generations. Communication across vast territories presented a unique challenge that tribes solved through layered signal systems, invisible networks that carried messages faster than any runner could travel. These weren't simple or crude methods, but sophisticated codes adapted to specific environments and needs, allowing coordination between hunting parties or warnings of approaching threats across remarkable distances. Smoke signals created visible messages that crossed miles in seconds. By manipulating fire with damp grass or branches, signallers produced specific patterns, puffs, columns or rings that conveyed pre-arranged meanings. The sophistication went far beyond simple presence indicators. Plains tribes developed complex positional codes where the location of the signal fire relative to landmarks added layers of meaning. Did weather affect reliability? Certainly, which is why multiple systems always existed in parallel. Bird call mimicry represented perhaps the most perfect form of covert communication. By reproducing the songs of local species with slight modifications, messages could be exchanged in the presence of outsiders or hostile forces without detection. Certain calls indicated danger, others signaled the location of game, while specific sequences could communicate complex messages about the number of enemies or the direction of travel. Trail marking systems use subtle arrangements of natural materials, stones placed in specific patterns, bent twigs or grass bundles, creating readable paths through seemingly untouched terrain. These markers conveyed information about water sources, game activity, or hazards ahead, while remaining invisible to anyone not trained in their recognition. Percussion-based communication reached its pinnacle with specific drum patterns that carried across remarkable distances. Water drums, designed to amplify sound through hollow chambers, could transmit messages up to 20 miles across open terrain. The patterns weren't random but language-based, with rhythms and tonal variations corresponding to spoken words or standardized codes. Perhaps most sophisticated was the development of sign language systems, particularly among plains tribes. These standardized hand signals allowed silent communication during hunts and eventually evolved into full languages capable of expressing abstract concepts, enabling communication between peoples with different spoken languages. While these signals guided tribes across familiar territories, venturing into unknown realms required deeper knowledge. Navigation systems based not on technology, but on intimate understanding of celestial patterns and natural indicators. Navigation without instruments meant reading the earth, sky, and everything in between. Indigenous peoples developed wayfinding systems so precise they could journey hundreds of miles across featureless terrain and return to specific locations with remarkable accuracy. These weren't random wanderings, but calculated movements based on layered environmental cues that worked in any weather, day, or night. Celestial navigation formed the foundation of long-distance travel. Northern Hemisphere tribes tracked the North Star as their fixed reference point, while Southern peoples used the Southern Cross constellation. More sophisticated were the star path techniques, recognizing how specific stars rose and set in relation to seasonal travel routes. The Polynesians perhaps perfected this science, navigating thousands of ocean miles by memorizing the rising and setting positions of over 150 individual stars. When clouds obscured the sky, natural compass indicators provided direction. Prevailing winds created physical patterns in trees that pointed consistently in one direction. Moss growth, while not always on the north side as commonly believed, did follow consistent patterns within specific regions that experienced navigators could interpret. What happened when these indicators weren't visible? Emergency orientation often relied on ant colonies, which typically align north-south in many environments. Terrain-based navigation treated landscapes as maps themselves. Watershed principles, understanding how water always flows downhill through predictable patterns, allowed navigation even in unfamiliar territory. Ridgeline systems provided consistent path options with better visibility and fewer obstacles than valley floors. Seasonal variations required adaptive techniques. Summer navigation relied more on vegetation indicators, while winter journeys used snow patterns created by prevailing winds. Migration routes of birds and animals provided additional directional information that changed throughout the year. Perhaps most remarkable were the memory systems used to record and transmit complex routes. Songlines, musical journeys encoding geographical features in their lyrics, allowed Australian Aboriginal peoples to navigate across vast distances. Other tribes created journey sticks, where notches and marks recorded distances and turning points. Children learned these systems through specialised games that developed spatial memory and observational skills. These journeys across vast territories required not just knowledge, but sustenance, prepared in vessels fashioned from the earth itself, clay cooking systems that transformed raw food into digestible, preserved nutrition. Clay transformed cooking from simple fire charring to sophisticated culinary chemistry. Long before metal pots or ceramic stovetops, tribal cooks created vessels from earth itself that could preserve nutrients, enhance flavours, and even detoxify certain foods. These weren't crude mud containers, but carefully engineered cooking systems with properties modern chefs pay premium prices to replicate. Finding appropriate clay required geological knowledge. Tribes identified deposits with ideal plasticity by testing how samples rolled between fingers or tasted on the tongue. Slightly sweet clays often indicated the right mineral balance for cooking vessels. After harvesting, the clay was carefully cleaned, removing stones and debris, then aged in cool locations to develop better working properties through bacterial action. Construction occurred without pottery wheels, yet achieved remarkable symmetry. Coil building, where long clay ropes were spiraled upward and smoothed together, created vessels of any size or shape. Other techniques included pinch pots for smaller containers and slab building for storage vessels. How did they achieve such precision without measuring tools? By developing intuitive proportional understanding through repetition and apprenticeship. Tempering materials prevented cracking during firing and use. Crushed shells added calcium that raised firing temperature tolerance, while sand created thermal shock resistance. Some tribes incorporated plant fibres that burned away during firing, creating microscopic air pockets that further prevented cracking. These weren't random additions, but carefully proportioned ingredients in a sophisticated material science. Firing transformed soft clay into durable ceramic through carefully managed open fires. Without kilns, tribes created temporary structures that controlled temperature using natural fuels with specific burning properties. Clay gradually transformed at temperatures approaching 1500 degrees, with colour changes indicating completion. The resulting cookware outperformed metal in several ways. Clay's thermal properties allowed gentle, even heating that prevented scorching. Many tribes developed natural non-stick treatments using specific seed oils or resins applied during first use. Nutrients leaching from clay vessels actually enhanced food with vital minerals, particularly iron and calcium, creating healthier meals without understanding the chemistry involved. Through summer heat and winter storms, tribal survival ultimately came down to adapting the body itself to environmental extremes, through ingenious clothing systems that regulated temperature using only what nature provided. Clothing represented the ultimate survival technology, a second skin that protected without restricting movement or natural sensory awareness. Indigenous clothing systems weren't primitive, but precisely engineered for specific environments. Often outperforming modern synthetics, in their adaptation to local conditions. These weren't just coverings, but complete microclimate management systems. Layering principles formed the foundation of effective insulation. Unlike single-layer garments, tribal clothing systems incorporated multiple specialized components working together. Airspaces between layers provided more insulation than the materials themselves, a principle modern outdoor gear still relies on today. How effective were these natural systems? Arctic peoples developed clothing that allowed comfortable survival in temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius without a single synthetic fibre. Inner layers typically came from processed plant materials. Milkweed, nettle, and cotton fibres were harvested, retted, partially decomposed to separate fibres, then spun into threads and woven into breathable fabrics. These plant-based layers wickered moisture away from the skin while providing temperature regulation, cooling through evaporation in summer, insulating when dry in winter. Outer layers required different properties altogether. Hides processed using brain tanning methods combined water resistance with breathability, allowing perspiration to escape while repelling rain and snow. Regional adaptations were remarkable. Desert peoples favoured lighter, reflective materials that breathed well, while northern tribes developed heavier, wind-resistant outer garments. Natural waterproofing came from sophisticated applications of animal oils. Fish oil treatments made sealskin parkas nearly waterproof while maintaining flexibility. Some tribes rubbed specific plant resins into leather to increase water repellency without sacrificing breathability, a balance modern synthetic fabrics still struggle to achieve. Perhaps most ingenious were the adaptable design elements. Clothing incorporated adjustable features, ties that could be loosened for ventilation, sleeves that could be removed as temperatures changed, and convertible elements that transformed based on immediate needs. Desert peoples created garments that could be reconfigured to provide shade during day, insulation at night. In these 15 tribal tools lies a wisdom deeper than mere survival tricks. They represent a relationship with the earth that sustained humanity for millennia. And in a world of increasing uncertainty, perhaps the most valuable tool isn't something you can hold in your hands, but the knowledge that you are never truly helpless when you understand how to read the living world around you.